The City of Astral lived its life, not by the sun, but by the color spectrum of anticipation. Its Christmas was a pure, materialized confluence of emotion and sensation. A thick, warm scent of gingerbread and pine sap drifted through the streets, mingled with the quiet, tender chime of crystal bells. At the heart of the city stood the great fountain of color, and around it, suspended on the finest threads, hung thousands of crystal vessels. Each vessel held a concentrated hue: the scarlet of a child's joy and cranberry ribbons, the deep blue of a winter night's serenity, the emerald of fresh fir needles. These colors were the collective gift the city bestowed upon itself. Elara, the keeper of light and hue, was the custodian of this spectrum. Her gift was the capacity not merely to see, but to feel every shade as a living, warm vibration. On this night, 3 days before the grand festival, she was performing the ritual of renewal. The touch of her hand made the hues within the vessels pulse brighter. She felt the collective anticipation rise, becoming an almost tangible golden dawn. Deeply hidden in her pouch lay the single most crucial vessel of pure hope, her personal reserve. As she completed the ritual, all the vessels should have exploded in a blinding, golden radiance. But at that very moment, from the northwest, a direction where the wind never blew, the colorless mist descended upon the city. It was neither white nor gray, but utterly neutral, consuming every shade it touched. The mist glided across the square, making no sound. It was absolute muteness, pure and simple, which suffocated even the inner voice and muffled the timid chime of the bells. Elara felt her gift wither. The colors around her grew flat and indifferent. And then she saw him. Leon, the Sculptor of Silence. He moved within the mist, his figure perfectly outlined, yet stripped of all hue. He had once been a renowned artist of Astral, obsessed with pure form, and now the mist had made him its conduit. Leon moved with surgical precision, touching the vessels. It was not destruction. It was a jewel, like theft. With every touch, the vessel lost its color, turning transparent, yet remaining unbroken. Leon was stealing not the crystal shells themselves, but their living essence, the collective emotion. Elara only managed to conceal her vessel of hope and helplessly watched as thousands of hues of anticipation vanished, carried away by the mist. When the last vessel was stolen, the mist instantly dispersed, leaving behind only a trail of perfect dead white leading into the wasteland. The city froze in apathy. The people did not grieve. They simply ceased to feel, their faces becoming clean yet blank canvases. Clutching her last, dimly glowing vessel of hope, Elara stepped out of the city. The trail left by Leon, the Sculptor of Silence, was astounding. It was the imprint of absolute zero, not merely snow, but the earth covered in a subtle layer of crystals perfectly devoid of refraction. They did not reflect light, but absorbed its very essence. Elara, wrapped tightly in her heavy cloak, felt the chill of indifference seep into her skin. An unnatural silence reigned, a stillness unbroken even by the sound of a falling snowflake. The festive decorations, which had recently shimmered with gold, now looked like dull, meaningless gray rags. She walked, focusing solely on her vessel. Occasionally, she had to press it against the ground to find barely discernible microscopic fissures in the whiteness traces where Leon might have demonstrated minimal human imperfection. She knew she could not defeat the mist with force. She had to find and retrieve the emotional spectrum. The further she went, the harder the mist tried to convince her that purity and peace lay in the absence of color. But Elara clung to the warmth of her vessel, which pulsed, reminding her of the messiness and beauty of the living world. The trail led Elara to the first serious barrier, the Labyrinth of Perfect Symmetry. It was an intricate complex of icy walls and arches, crafted by Leon. The labyrinth was constructed according to strict mathematical laws. Every line was flawless, every angle perfectly true. It was beautiful and cold, and this very perfection paralyzed the will. Inside the labyrinth, Elara saw colorless sculptures, perfect replicas of the city's inhabitants, frozen in a moment of apathy. The sculptures were clad in gray, flawlessly smoothed forms, devoid even of folds in their garments. Leon was not hiding. He was showcasing his art. Elara realized that the labyrinth was a challenge to her sensory gift. She began to search for a disruption in the harmony. She noticed that while the walls were symmetrical, their symmetry was dead. It lacked the movement of life, the dynamic error. Using the vessel of hope, Elara began to isolate those sections of the labyrinth where a minimal fluctuation of light could be felt, points where Leon, being an artist, had failed to completely extinguish his creative fire. These were his involuntary errors in symmetry, and they pointed the way out. Elara emerged into a wide, perfectly flat valley covered in coal-black ice. This was the Crossroads of Apathy, a place where clots of old, discarded emotions were stored. On the icy walls hung the shadows of forgotten sensations, fear, disappointment, nostalgia. The mist used these shadows to suppress her will, trying to convince her that all feelings ultimately lead to pain, and it was better to be rid of them. Elara felt her own memory of vibrant colors begin to fade. What was red? Merely a wave. What was happiness? Simply a fleeting spasm. Leon wanted her to believe that the only path to peace was emotional nullification. Her salvation came not from a grand memory, but from a messy yet sincere color she materialized with her vessel, the hue of melted wax on a fingertip. This was the color of small, insignificant but living pain and clumsy care. This memory of life's imperfection shattered the mist's flawless illusion, allowing Elara to move onward, clinging to that imperfect, warm shade. Leon's path led Elara to a hall where she confronted an icy double, created by the mist, but sculpted by Leon. Elara's double was perfectly calm and impassive. It spoke silently, yet its message was clear. Your duty is an endless, meaningless burden. Stop. Let go. Here in stillness, there is no suffering, no failure. The double showed Elara her future life, devoid of emotion, yet perfectly ordered and free from risk. This was a test of personal apathy. Elara knew that if she believed her service was meaningless, her vessel of hope would empty. She did not argue. Instead, she materialized 3 colors around herself that were impossible to order: the venomous green of first jealousy, the dull brown of an old mistake, and the shimmering orange of sudden inspiration. She showed the double that life was a mess, and that this very mess was what made Christmas valuable. The icy double, unable to withstand this chaos of emotions, cracked and crumbled. Elara reached the center. It was a vast circular grotto, its dome vanishing into the cold, lifeless darkness. This was the Vault of Void. Thousands of stolen crystal vessels hung suspended in the air. They were transparent, yet not empty. The colors within them were asleep, frozen in a state of perfect inactivity. In the center of the hall stood Leon. He was covered in the finest layer of rime, and his face expressed a perfect, cold serenity. He did not raise his hands. He said not a word. He was the final sculpture, a work of art that had achieved absolute purity by renouncing life. Beside him, like a cloud of shadow, the colorless mist wavered. This was the most terrifying aspect. The mist was not a villain, but a promise of peace, and Leanne was its successful exemplar. Leon finally spoke, not with his mouth, but with a vibration in the air. He showed Elara the beauty of this silence, how free it was from the chaos of the holiday, from the screaming shades of joy and pain. He stretched out his hand toward the vessels, demonstrating their flawless, glassy form. He tried to convince Elara that her duty was over. Let these colors remain beautiful, yet dead specimens. Elara stepped forward. She did not fight. She opened her vessel of pure hope and released its color. It was not a blinding light, but a soft, deep, golden amber hue that began slowly to envelop Leon. This color did not attack. it reminded. It was the color of the creative impulse, the hue of the first, imperfect brushstroke on the canvas, the color of a hand-seeking form. The golden amber hue of hope pierced through the rime on Leanne. Leanne winced. He saw not beautiful peace, but the empty, dead form he had created. He realized that perfect symmetry was the end of art, not its zenith. His face contorted with a sudden, long-forgotten pain of self-disappointment. This was redemption through remorse, rather than through love. Shaken by the lively, though imperfect, power of the hue, Leanne stepped back. His perfect, icy posture collapsed. At that moment, the mist, stripped of its perfect instrument, hissed and attempted to consume Elara. But as Leanne retreated, the spectrum of anticipation in the vessels, jolted by hope, awoke. Thousands of shades flared, filling the grotto with a living, warm light. The mist, unable to exist near genuine emotion, dispersed, turning into harmless vapor. Elara, weary yet serene, gathered the vessels. The journey back was swift. As Elara carried the vessels, the world around her filled with color. She returned to the square of Astral, and raising the vessels to the sky, restored the spectrum of anticipation. The city instantly sprang to life. People blinked, their gray faces filled with color, apathy replaced by a joyous, warm excitement. The chime of the returned bells and the spicy scent of gingerbread spread across the square. They resumed their interrupted tasks, remembering nothing of the mist, but feeling a deep, inexplicable gratitude. Leon remained at the edge of the city. He was free from the mist, but a long journey now lay ahead of him, to return to imperfect, living art. Elara watched him from afar. She sought neither glory nor recognition. Her duty was done. She had restored not just light, but the ability to feel. Christmas Eve's sun rose, illuminating a city that now shone with every shade of living, complex, and therefore beautiful hope.